Well, good evening and welcome to the 2024 Dr. Elizabeth Webb Professional Learning Series. I'm Maria Gillentine, Georgia TESOL member at large and an instructional coach in the Multilingual Learner Program Office of Gwinnett County Public Schools. So for tonight, April 18th, I'm delighted to be the moderator and recorder of this wonderful session. Wanted to just, before we begin, oh, no. Before we begin, I just would love to remind you of some features of the 2024 Dr. Elizabeth Webb Professional Learning Series. So our theme is disciplinary language and literacy communities of practice. As you know, we do the talks twice a month and free professional learning for all areas of the TESOL profession. We also hold the Georgia TESOL socials, which I highly encourage you to attend. If you haven't so far, they're a lot of fun. I believe we're planning one in December, so you want to attend those. Our professional learning topics cover the areas of teaching and learning, administration, adult education, and community engagement, and of course, higher education and research, which is our topic for this evening. So tonight we have two wonderful ladies that will be joining us and sharing their information, expertise, and experience. So I'm pleased to announce our two amazing guest speakers this evening are Abby Johnston and Kira Coats, who will be sharing their experiences in the field, collaborative efforts, and what is forthcoming for doctoral students. I'll let them, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen and let them tell you a little bit more about themselves. Abby Johnston is the ESOL coordinator for Winterboro High School. She has a master's degree in teaching culturally and linguistically diverse students and is working towards a doctorate of education and curriculum studies, multicultural and social justice education at Georgia Southern University. While Kira Coats is an ELA teacher and 10th grade literature PLC leader. She is currently working for educational specialist of curriculum and instruction with an ESOL endorsement through Kennesaw State University. So please join me in welcoming Abby Johnston and Kira Coats. And it should stop sharing. There we go.
Okay. Hello, everybody. We're really pleased to be here. I'm Abby Johnstone, the ESOL coordinator for Winterboro High School, and this is...
I'm Kira Coats, language arts teacher at Winterboro High School.
And we've been working together for the past 3 years. And the first 2 years of that, we were collaborative co-teachers for at least one block a day. And so we really got to hone our working relationship together. But before we jump to that, we'll go through just a little bit of our slideshow here, which does not have actual information. You don't need to read too much into it. It's more or less to guide us through what we're doing tonight. All right. So for this evening, we have structured it in a way that's really similar to how we actually interact with each other as professionals in this building anyways. We have academic conversations. We tend to run up to each other excitedly with these new ideas, and we collaborate easily. So for us, doing a presentation for you guys seemed more appropriate to have a conversation between us, explaining our ideas and thought processes, and then open the floor to you for questions. So that is the format for tonight. Whatever's on the slides will basically just be to keep us on track so that we don't wander too far down memory lane or off onto tangents, which we have both been known to do because we just get really excited and enthusiastic about what we're working with. All right. So our first question that we decided we were going to talk about today is, what is your educational background? And I'm going to let Kira take this one first.
Okay, so for my educational background, it's a little bit different. My bachelor's degree is from Berry College, and it is actually in music performance, French horn. I originally was going to go into the ministry and got to subbing at my old high school and changed my mind. And I really, really liked working with the high schoolers and the younger people, and that changed a completely different path. And I ended up getting my master's in English education from Georgia State University. I taught in Gwinnett for 14 years at South Gwinnett and at Grayson before moving over to Winder. And I really, really like this little school, and all the rural kids and all the FFA kids show me pictures of their cows and chickens, and
They do get very excited about the cows and the chickens. I do love that.
I do. It's precious, but no, it's great. I really like it here, and it feels like it did when I grew up in Middle Georgia. So it's a little bit closer to what I remember. So, but yeah, a bachelor's degree to English teacher.
And then your capstone for your
Yes.
specialist has been in what?
Thank you for that. I'm coming to the end of my specialist degree, and I'm running on fumes as far as it goes. I should finish it next week. It's in curriculum and instruction, and my capstone is specifically looking at interdisciplinary approaches to content, both synthesizing what they've already learned, like project-based learning, but also what I'm more interested is how to introduce the content initially in an interdisciplinary way that basically closely resembles to how the world works in real life. So the world is not necessarily just one content at a time. It's usually a lovely little jumble. And so we've been exploring ways that we can present content in a way that more closely resembles how it's going to look out in the wild.
Out in the wild. I like
Yeah,
that. Let's
out
do
in the
out in the wild. Yeah. Okay. And then for me, my educational background, other than while I was in elementary, middle, and high school, I was in the special education program because of my ADHD, which you do learn the coping mechanisms, and you think that there's a stigma to it when you are younger, but as you grow older, you realize this isn't something that's just me, and it's not about just me. Lots of people have similar backgrounds, similar issues, and being honest and open about those has helped me work with my students and their families a lot better, because the parents know that I actually mean it when I say I understand how hard it is for you to focus. So going back to my colleges, I went to UNG up in Dahlonega before it was UNG, and I majored in Spanish and I majored in education. So it was technically a double major. I graduated from there and I moved to Hartwell, Georgia, which is on the Georgia-South Carolina border, where I taught in a very rural school district where chickens and cows and pigs were brought to the school, not just shown pictures of them, on a pretty regular basis. So that was kind of a culture shock for me because I'm from here in this Winder, Gwinnett area. But I taught Spanish up there for 8 years before I got my master's degree in teaching culturally and linguistically diverse students. And I just absolutely fell in love with what I do with ESOL learners and how do I best support them. So my focus in my doctoral studies is on culturally and linguistically sustaining pedagogies and making sure that I am supporting my students to honor, appreciate, accept who they are and their background, and know that they are welcome as they are. So I try always to meet my students where they're at and recognize the really incredible fountains of knowledge, because all of them have their own backgrounds and their own histories, and they know things about the world in ways that I don't necessarily know. And so recognizing that is a big part of my role here as a coordinator. But also, like Ms. Coates was saying, the interdisciplinary approach. Within my classrooms here, we do try and do project-based learning, and we try and integrate multi-step and multi-dimensional work that's not just a traditional read it out of a textbook, copy the lines, take the test, because that's not how the world works. And then for our ESOL learners, they are going to go out into the workforce, or they're going to go into college, or they're going to go into college and become so much more successful than we can ever even dream of. But having a realistic understanding of how do I work together with other people and collaborate, and how do we get this work done, that has been really the foundational piece of the ESOL program we built here, is making sure that everything meshes together and blends well. Anything else to add to that?
I think I didn't mention that, and we're only going to come back to it because I know I bring it up later too. Is I did get my gifted endorsement.
Yeah,
I would say my 4th year teaching, and from there I've taught AP Lit for the majority of my career and graded AP Lit exams for College Board a couple of summers. One of them being the summer of 2020. It's-
We don't like to talk about that, Summer.
That was also my last year doing it. But yeah, the gifted endorsement comes up too later on, because that's a big part of the conversation for my classroom. But yeah, I think that was the last one for educational background.
Let's see, what was next? How do you identify yourself culturally, and how does that play into your instruction? I'm gonna go first here. I love Kira so much, and I'm gonna go first here because I'm gonna laugh if she tries to go first here. I am a Scotch Irish European American white woman of the middle class, closer to the lower end of the socioeconomic towards middle. But I am your traditional European American white woman. My family has been here since the 16 and 1700s. I do recognize the horrors that my ancestors portrayed on other people. And I understand the privilege that I have based on my own identity and background. I am also a heterosexual female. I identify that way. My pronouns are she, her. However, academically, I do prefer to go by they, just because I do recognize that the masculine or the neutral there does tend to get a little bit more traction sometimes when we are talking academically in a professional setting. So I do identify that way. But more than that, for me, culture is something that is not just a monolith. Culture is something that we each individually, we bring our own culture to it. Like, for example, my family, no one speaks a foreign language in my family. However, they have traveled and they have encouraged me to travel. Music and arts and traveling has become a part of who I am. And so that is part of our culture, is just accepting and expressing a desire to see the world through other lenses. So for me, culture is deeply personal. Even if we share it with other people, there's always elements of culture that overlap, but there's also a uniquely individual part of our culture. And it does shape how we impact with our students. For example, I know that my experiences traveling really align to some of my students who have traveled, but yet it doesn't quite align to my students who are immigrants who have come here fresh from other countries, because my experience of travel has been for my own knowledge and my own enjoyment. Whereas sometimes my students, not sometimes, more frequently than not, my students have left a situation that was not by their choice. And so their experience of travel and my experience of travel, I think of travel as this wonderful gift and this wonderful, great adventure. And for them, it might not be the same. So recognizing that is important to how I interact with my students and how I present topics in class. So.
Abby, maybe go second, because of a question a student asked us one time when we were co-teaching. We were doing like a ask the teacher anything post-it notes, and one of them was a sweet question. They asked us, what is your cultural background, which we thought was really sweet. Abby was going through, kind of a similar heritage thing, and while she was doing that, disclaimer, my husband, children, and I have a family motto that we really just do not take ourselves that seriously. And so while Abby was talking, I went up quietly to the board and pulled up a box of assorted crackers. And that was what I told. I said, this is it. This is my heritage, y'all. I said, it's just as plain white as it can be. I'm sorry.
I will go ahead and point out, this was our first year co-teaching together.
I learned a lot since then.
And we had 18 students in the class, and not one of them came from a European American background. They were all multilingual learners, and not one of them understood the reference.
Which meant that Abby had to stop and explain it. And that was probably the funniest part of the whole thing, was not that they didn't catch my joke, but was that watching Abby sit there and have to explain this term to all the kids. It became a comedy show without us realizing it, but
I have fond memories of that group.
That was a very fun group. But it is very similar to Abby's, though, as far as it's mostly Scottish, English, a little bit of Welsh. The joke my mother used to say, yes, we had some Native American in there, and I would tease her. I go, no, we don't, Mom. No, we don't. And then she finally did the ancestry thing, not Nope, not a drop. I was right.
Yeah.
So,
And that is a part of our cultural heritage too,
Yeah.
because my grandparents also, on my mom's side especially, used to say, yeah, we're X amount of Cherokee, and then the DNA test says something completely different.
yeah,
And so we've got to look at that from a curriculum standpoint too, of how much of what our ancestors have put in textbooks or how much of what is already in textbooks can we take seriously and how much can we not, and how do we critically examine all of that.
so
Yeah.
culturally, I know for me, maybe I didn't identify as particularly Southern before, but when I was 15, we spent a year, we lived in Alexandria, Virginia for about a year. And
Which
that
technically is still the South.
it is technically still the South, but it's not.
Yeah.
Culturally, it was not. But that was where I started identifying as more Southern because of that experience. And so when I talk to the kids about stuff, I'll bring in maybe cultural traits of Southern, of like my Southern family. You know, they're in Middle Georgia and South Georgia, Randolph County. So I was born in Albany. So deep South. And so, but pulling from that cultural stuff and talking to them about that, and I could say, you know, well, your family may be like mine in this regard, or your family could be completely different. And I think we were talking about how we deal with problems and whether we talk about them or we politely ignore them. So
My family is definitely of the politely ignore them.
as is
variety.
mine. And that was a conversation because we'd seen a family in a book do it. And so I was talking about how culturally that is something you see a lot with that particular kind of family, mine. So,
And that did not resonate well with our students. They're like, why would you keep, why? Because then the problem gets bigger. It really baffled some of our students.
yeah, they just kind of looked at me funny.
I'm gonna move us on to our next before we, when you started working with multilingual learners, what did you imagine it would be like? Well, for me, because I had been teaching Spanish for so long, I thought it was going to be very similar to teaching Spanish, but in reverse. And I was not wrong, but I was also very far from being right. So how I work with these students in English, and I'm doing the ESOL work with them, it's less about teaching them the finite details of the language and more about giving them the confidence and the tools to be successful in the language. So for me, I imagined it would be rows of desks doing work just like I did in the Spanish classroom for years, only in English. And I'm just thrilled that that is not the reality of what I do every day.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know for me, my first experience with a co-taught classroom with
For ESOL.
for ESOL, we called it, I think, push-in.
Push-in or collaborative co-teaching or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, we saw our master schedule, and it was right before graduation. They said, "Here's the tentative master schedule," and I saw something that said push-in, and I had to find out what that was because that was completely new to me. And at first, I thought it was going to be more just very, very limited English. And now that I'm getting my ESOL endorsement, I now know in my head I was thinking it was going to be a bunch of like L1 students, and that was what I was anticipating, was it was going to be more of that, and I was not sure quite how to navigate that, but I knew it was a push-in, so they were going to be in there with the general ed students too, so trying to figure that out. But that was my first impression when I thought I was going to deal with multilingual students, was that. And I know I love my if they ask if I speak Spanish, I say I speak tourism Spanish. So that's been tested, tried and true, and I've progressed as well. But that was my first thought when I knew I was going to do a push-in class with you, was I thought I was going to have a lot of the beginners.
Yeah. And then I will go ahead and switch us to our next slide. And how does that imagined reality compare to the experiences you've had in working with these multilingual students? I'm going to go ahead and jump in here and say that Barrow County has an international newcomer program that served at a different site. We transition the students back here. When they get to a composite level of about a 2.0 on the access, so usually the first year and a half, they spend at our international newcomer program, and then they come here to us to be served in sheltered or collaborative co-taught classes. So we don't get a tremendous amount of students that are truly deer in the headlights, frozen in place, no understanding of what's going on at all. We get very few of them in our facility itself. So that does impact a lot of what we're doing. But we do start transitioning them over here probably before they're ready to go without the training wheels. And so you do have to support a vast array of the students. And then for me, the lived experience is just that I have enjoyed every moment of every day working with these students, even the days that break your heart. Because you really, at the end of the day, you know that the student either gets it or they don't, and you could keep working on it tomorrow, and you keep working and you keep working until you get there with them. And you might not ever get there with them, but you will progress past where they started. And that is so rewarding for me. And they know that I'm an advocate for them. So they come to me, and that's been my experience of it, has been just the part where the students learn to trust you, and you build that rapport with them, and they will come to you, and they want your advice, they want your input. And a lot more so than I think any of my Spanish students ever did. No one ever wanted to come to me to say, hey, what did you think about this? No, I didn't have that as a Spanish teacher. And it's been very rewarding for me as an individual and as an educator in the world of ESOL to have all of that. So.
Oh yeah. Well, no, for me, once we got into the pushing class, that it threw me off, because at the time I had not begun any ESOL training at all at that point. And
it was your first introduction.
It was, which I love those kids and they were great for it. But I think what threw me off was I would hear them speak in English just fine. And I didn't know at the time that that was basically the social English versus the academic English. I didn't know there was a difference when I first started, which is why Abby's role in that class was so important, because she could look at that. And the gifted training that I had been trained for majority of my career to write in a more academic sense, because it was helping prepare them for the higher language of those college papers and the higher language of, what the professors would use. So writing in the high academic language, I like to call it high Elven, of all of that is what I was used to. And of course, the critical thinking, a part of it was, that's in everything on level, all the way up through the gifted and honors kids. But because the kids could speak to me in English with seemingly little problem, Abby was great for coming in afterwards and saying, rephrase this, or be more specific here, or don't just say, write your thoughts, tell them how many sentences, which in like gifted education is a big no-no. You don't that's micromanaging there, but it's not here. And
I think that because what we're doing when we get real specific there, like for example, the work we were doing earlier today, you had explain in your directions, and it just ended at explain. And I said, you might want to say explain with 3 supporting details or something to that extent. Give them a finite amount. And what that actually does is it reduces the cognitive load on them to the point where they can give you their best. They can show you what they do now versus explain what do you want me to explain? Do you want me to explain everything I know? Do you want me to explain nothing? Like, it's when we're real specific with our ESOL kids, it takes just one tiny bit of cognitive load off, so that while they're translating and thinking through things in multiple languages in their head, they can give you their best work. Because I know you need 3 supporting details. I got you. I can find those details. I can give it to you. But I got to know I need to find these 3 things. I need you to help support me just that little bit more so I can give you what we need. Yeah. Now, for your gifted class, you probably expect them to know. You just want 3.
Well, and for the gifted class, it's that sort of you're refining their judgment so that they can start. You want them to work on their interpretation skills at the same time. And for the kids who are multilingual learners, they're already interpreting just at a different way. They're literally interpreting rather than, some sort of post-formal thought interpreting. And so it's a different way. But doing having to reprogram myself to get out of not even say to get out of the gifted ways, but not phrase stuff like that. But I still, and we were talking about this earlier too, that still wanting those high cognitive demands, but then they can give you their best if you take off a little bit of their cognitive load where you can, because they've got more barriers in front of them than, let's say, some of the gifted students do, so that the gifted students can take those obtuse instructions and they can show it to you because for them, less is more. You give them more freedom, you can get some beautiful stuff out of the gifted and honors kids, but with the multilingual learners, and they can also be gifted as well, but
Many of them are.
Yes, God, they're so smart. But they're also fighting more barriers in the way in order to demonstrate that mastery of that content or to demonstrate those cognitive abilities. And so it's what barrier, it's not even what, we're not watering it down, it's what barriers can we remove to help you show your best self.
Right.
And that's really what a lot of it boils down to. And that's me having to reprogram myself to learn how to rephrase instructions better, to learn how to be more specific as far as what I want. So because some of that is not intuitive either, especially if you haven't grown up in an American education system. Some of the stuff that we do, like multiple choice, my understanding is multiple choice is really more of an American thing, essentially the amount of that we put on it. So learning how to do assessments, learning how to do that in a ways that can really help them show their best mastery of it.
Right.
And taking away those barriers in front of them that are really just kind of unfair, because a lot of the other students who can show you readily, they don't have those same barriers.
And it's quite possible that our students do understand what we're trying to get them to show us. They just can't show it to us in a way that is what we handed them. So they might need a little bit of a rethink, a little bit of a tweak, and they can do it just fine.
Yeah.
But we will move on to our next slide so we don't run out of time. All right, collaborative co-teaching versus sheltered instruction. We've done both. For us, collaborative co-teaching is where we're both in the classroom. She's delivering content most of the time. I'm in the background going, okay, let's pause there. Let's pause, because I know you didn't get that. Explain it to me again, and then we teamwork back and forth there. And I'm kind of in that room. I am there and I am contributing to the conversations. I'm contributing to the lessons, but I'm more or less the facilitator to make sure that we all access the content equitably. So that's what our collaborative co-teaching has been like. And then this year, I got rid of her training wheels and just said, you go fly. Time to leave the nest, go fly. And she has been doing sheltered instruction, which for us, sheltered instruction is where it's just one ESOL endorsed teacher and the students, and that person is responsible for everything. Since we have a larger population, I was needed elsewhere in our facility this year. So she had to leave the nest, so to speak, and she's been doing a wonderful job with that.
Well, and in my program, I was allowed 2 electives, and they said you could use it to begin an endorsement. So there was an ESOL endorsement. So I just did two out of the 3 classes for my ESOL endorsement there, and then just took the 3rd one this semester, which in hindsight was a very poor life choice, to take the final ESOL class at the same time as a capstone.
Since we are talking about graduate studies here, do know your limits. That is something that you need to get clear on, is you need to know your limits. What are my possibilities? Can I handle it? And I think we can all handle what we've taken on just because of the collaborative work that we do. And when we're super stressed out and I don't know if I can make this deadline, you let your team know, and they've got you. They'll support you. If you need them to sit with your kids for 25 minutes so you could go type out your ideas while they're fresh in your head, we've got it. We can make it work. And so the collaboration, even on just making sure that we stay sane, has been huge.
It has been. And with the sheltered instruction, I end up teaching it. The class looks completely different, because when we did co-teaching, I taught the same content that I did with my other World Lit students, but I had Abby to jump in as needed to qualify, to intercede, sometimes to intervene.
We did go to our next question.
Yay!
We just naturally flowed into it. I love how that happens sometimes.
But now that I'm in there by myself with, as a wholly sheltered class, I've thrown a lot of what I normally do out the window. So for example, I would always start the first day of school with the danger of a single story from Chimamanda Adichie. And I realized that if I started that with the multilingual students, they would look at me with well, of course, because that's their reality. They don't need to be told this. So I thought, well, there's something else I can do that may be a little bit more impressive for them up front. But there were certain ones that seemed redundant, but there were also complete plays, we ordered the whole new books, right? There was a
We have to do a play every year. So we had done
Antigone in the
Antigone,
past.
which is great, but that's also really difficult to do with multilingual learners.
There's so many levels of just barriers there as far as it's a lot. And
yeah,
I found there was a playwright, he rewrote 3 Greek tragedies for a modern Latino audience, and it was amazing. And so we instead of doing Antigone or Oedipus Rex, we did Oedipus El Rey, and it's a modern example. So instead of there being a Greek chorus, it was a group of, per his directions, Cholo prisoners. And it was beautifully done though, but it was a way that the students understood it, and the characters used slang that they used. You've got Creon leaning up against a store drinking a horchata. And so it was just, they knew it. And they were able to help me out too. And it was fun.
And I think you had them read it aloud.
We did. We took I would take up if there was one part that was a little bit big, we would do that. But we did get them to read it out loud, and that was fun. Especially because he wove in and out of English and Spanish. And so I would ask them about certain words, if that was a positive or negative word, and I let them sort of be the boss for a while, as far as they were the authorities on the language, and I gave them that ownership of their language back and let them be in charge.
Right.
And it was a much more meaningful experience than just plain Jane Antigone would have been. Although I like Antigone, but this one
I love Antigone, but the kids don't relate to it as well.
This one was more impactful. Yeah, this one was much more impactful. And then just reprogramming how I think to fulfill those standards. What counts as mastery? What does it look like? Since I've taught all the honors and gifted kids, I'm so used to books, papers. That was what it was, that very westernized view, very ivory tower. And I love British lit. That's why I got into teaching, because I love Chaucer, I love Beowulf. Yeah, I love it all. And so having to rethink.
I was gonna say who doesn't, but the answer is very obvious. Our students.
There's a lot of people who really don't. I've learned. But with that, they're not for everybody. And there are things that the students can have a more meaningful experience with. And so me having to put my preferences aside and say, okay, I love the Canterbury Tales. If I've slogged you through it, I don't think I've done either of us any favors.
I think that part of that also ties into our cultures.
Yeah.
Like, because we both come from a background where, Chaucer, we got it. We understand that. And Shakespeare, we got it. We understand this. But our heritage means that we have more exposure to that from a younger age, and we relate to it because it comes from people that are, by and large, from our background as European Americans. So I think that cultural lens shift and taking a step back of, okay, well, I want you to relate to the book. I don't want it to just be because I like the book. I want you to enjoy reading this as well.
And that was a very freeing moment for me when I finally realized that I wasn't just limited to, let's say, the Western canon plus Things Fall Apart. Being able to bring in a lot of that. And sometimes I'll bring in stuff, I said identify as Southern, but I'll bring in stuff for the kids to see that I feel is also important, because I want to share parts of my culture with them, or parts that are maybe culturally adjacent. I'm not from Appalachia, but tomorrow, my freshmen, because we've been reading The Hunger Games and that's there, we're going to be looking at murder ballads. So, and that brings in with my music degree too. So I'm very excited for all of this. But being able to bring in that, or I think there was another class I shared some Jack Tales, and being able to bring in certain folklore from that as well. It's been really nice and freeing.
Yeah.
Because not only is their culture validated, but since I'm not Oxford trained, part of my culture is too, because Southern Lit's its own genre as well. So being able to share little pieces of ourselves in there has been great, and letting them share with me.
Well, we have about 10-15 minutes before we need to open up to our Q&A.
Yes.
So let's go through and see what else we've got to answer.
Yeah.
If the board will reply. Perhaps it will, perhaps it won't. We'll know later. What sparked your decision to go back to the next steps in your own educational journey? I don't know that this is a great question for me, because my spark to go into my master's program is the primary spark. And that was when I was teaching in Hartwell, and I was started to get more students that were coming to me from diverse backgrounds. And so I started working with them in the afternoons. Our ESOL teacher up there was 49%. He was there in the mornings and he was gone in the afternoons. So they put those students with me for a class of Spanish where I was working with them in English. And I realized very quickly, I'm doing a disservice to these students. They need more than this. This is not enough to support them. And so I started my master's program with Georgia Southern. And immediately upon finishing that, I graduated, I want to say on the 15th of the month. By the 30th of the month, I was already enrolled, taking and progressing through the first round of the doctoral courses there at Georgia Southern University. So I think I counted it once as 8 days between my two educational journeys. And if you are a sane person, you might want to give yourself a little bit more of a breather. But also at the same time, I know myself well enough to know that if I had taken a breather, the chances of me going back or ever feeling like I was at a moment in my life to go back were pretty slim. So I don't regret that I just rolled right through, but I'm still working on that spark from 2018 when I had that inspiration to start that master's program. So that's for me, and then I'll let you answer that before.
Right. Well said. My bachelor's degree is in music, so it was not anything to do with education at all. I got my teaching certification and my master's degree at the same time. It was the Georgia State, it was the TEAMS program. I think its name has changed at that point, but I started teaching English in 2006. This is about 3-4 years in, I got my gifted certification, and that honestly, I held steady for a long time. I, got married, had kids, a bunch of adult life milestones in there. And so I was holding steady, but I really loved the gifted certification because it taught me to look at learning in very, very different ways. And when I decided to go back, part of that was because of after you've gone a while, I'm finishing up year 18 now, and it's easy to get stagnant. And I would say, especially language arts teachers are stereotyped as being because we love our Western canon, we can be stereotyped as being fairly stagnant and stuck in our little beloved text. And so I think it's important to always remember you're a work in progress. And so I wanted to go back, look at getting my specialist. One result of COVID was an advancement in a lot of online programs and online learning. It was fast tracked, being much more mainstream, much more affordable. And since my kids are 11 and 13, going back to school physically was not an option. So I was able to do it, and I was happy about that. And that's really what sparked it, though, was I don't want to stagnate. I like learning. I love learning. And so being able to do that, and then with the curriculum and instruction, and then with the ESOL endorsement on top of that, they really did go hand in hand. There was a lot of crisscrossing just as far as getting you to rethink how we approach learning itself.
Right.
Those two really did read a lot of crosses. There were actually ESOL centered questions on my GACE. And I remember thinking, if I did not work on this endorsement, this question would be wrong. So yeah, they crisscrossed that much. It was a little wild.
Right.
But yeah, just wanting to not stagnate.
To make sure we're serving our students. And it's the constant striving to be a better educator tomorrow than I was yesterday.
Yeah. There's always something more to learn.
Always. What's your hope for the next chapter in your career?
Well, I know for me, right now I'm perfectly content. I have no interest in going into administration. The only thing that I could see as far as my next hope is really just to be a good teacher. I joked one time that I want the kids to talk about me with the same reverence that they do restaurants who put extra wings in their order, because if you heard them talk about like I want that same reverence. I want that same importance in their life.
I want that same importance as the one that gives me the extra taco on my order of 3.
Yes.
That would just be, or that extra shot of espresso in my coffee. Just
being able to matter in people's lives, and being able to make that difference. Like you said, it's these guys come to us and with stories and backgrounds and experiences that'll raise hair on the back of your neck. It's oh my God, so heartbreaking. And so but also inspiring too, that all that they're able to do. It's just they have no idea how amazing they are either. But being able to,
I strive to tell them how amazing they are, but also not let it get to their heads, because sometimes when it gets to their heads,
that's a balance.
It's a balancing act, and everything in life is a balancing act.
Yeah.
But
maybe go ahead. Yeah.
I think my next step is to continue serving the populations. But I have realized in the past little bit, as I've been working with these students, is that my talent, while I am a great classroom teacher and I am great working with students one-on-one, I'm also very interested in working with the educators, and from a programmatic standpoint, how can I maximize my impact to make sure that all students are getting the best quality education and getting this really, really intense, meaningful education. And for me, that might not be in a classroom anymore. So I'm not 100% sure where my next leg of the journey, where my next chapter takes me after this degree. However, it will still be working in ESOL and doing this with the intention of striving for better tomorrow than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
And how can we maximize the impact, the positive impact, I should say, for our students. So that's, I think, for me, where I see this going.
Well, I mean, and you do a great job too of being, because you'll, like when I say, I need your ESOL eyes, you'll say that, but then you always take the time to explain it afterwards. You always take the time to look at stuff and give feedback, and it's always very constructive and everything. You do,
and even if I'm like, we need to rework this, it's like, I love this part.
Yeah. No, you do great feedback. I think that if you were to go and guide more teachers and everything, I think that would do really well. I think that it would be your desire to impact would be met.
I think that it's still something that's very much a fluid state at the moment of where it's going next, but just onwards, upwards, keep working with the kids, keep making education easier for them.
Yeah.
All right. We are tracking along right on time.
Yay. It's almost like our day is run by bells.
Oh, you evil person. Oh, the bells get us all the time. I get caught by the bells so frequently in my classes. It's terrible, but everything in my classes is project-based learning. So the kids are always into something. They're always doing something. Like today we were working on poetry analysis, the whole technique of, is there a rhyme scheme? Is there onomatopoeia? Is there anaphora? And this is in a class where all of my students are recently returned to this school from Newcomers Academy. So English is very not academically advanced at the moment for my students, but we still can work on this stuff. And so we were doing a song analysis, and we were analyzing music as poetry. And so they were all sharing the favorite songs that they had, and they were throwing them up on the board. Can we listen to mine next? Can we listen to mine next? And we totally got caught by the bell. I had to send out an email to several teachers like, I'm sorry, my third block is late. That's on me. And I think that Erica was one of the ones that was a little bit behind today. But
I think she can.
Yeah. It gets a little crazy sometimes. All right. I think at this point, we would like to open it up to anybody that has questions for us. So what is one burning question that you have for us? And since the computer's on the other side of the room, if you are typing, we would love for somebody to help us read those out loud.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet. But thank you for sharing such great information. If any of our participants can just unmute and share.
Or what you've experienced in your own practice. Yeah.
Hi, Abby. It's Gicia Nunez.
Hola, Gicia!
How are you? Hi, Dr. Lecky.
She was in the master's program with me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We graduated today.
I just wanted to say that I've loved listening to you girls, and that I am very proud of what you're doing, and that you are serving our population so well. So I just wanted to say thank you.
With lots of love.
Thank you. While people are thinking, we need to share is the cars thing.
Yes.
So we were talking about, so this is where
one of our favorite students, and he's going to graduate in a few weeks. So we're super excited.
I can't wait. So what we had was, this was a great example of like that gifted honors training meets that multilingual mindset. is we had read my favorite Shakespeare play. Sometimes I just can't help myself. It's The Merchant of Venice, and
that's a real fun one to try and explain to people in their second language, by the way. Just
Yes.
if you are ever
It's a
thinking
lot.
about it, make sure that you have a bilingual person in there that can really like
It's
help
a
you
lot.
break it down, because you're
Yes.
gonna need it.
But it's a great play, and we were talking about, well, and it centers around a marginalized person too. So
Yeah.
you know, there were some really interesting plays and connections. But we had a student. He was a super duper car buff guy. He had to do a persuasive speech, and instead he did nothing but, for his whole 2 minutes, he told nothing but 4 jokes. And he could barely get the 4 jokes out because he was laughing so hard at his own jokes.
And
He loves
was
cars.
great.
Yeah, everything he did with cars. So I don't know if it was the day of or like an earlier period of the day before, but we had this moment where I knew that the discussion questions for the test, I wasn't sure how he was going to do, but we had that moment. We said, let's play to his strengths. And so we changed the test.
Only his.
Yeah, only
I
his
should
test.
specify that. It was an experiment.
Yeah.
I apologize for not getting permission to do an experiment on a student, but we thought that we would be safe on this one. We only changed the essay question.
Just the essay
on his
question
test.
for his. And so instead of it being, you know, who is more wrong or anything like that, he had a choice. We said, these are the 4 main characters. If each of these characters were a car, what would they be and why?
It took him 3 hours to finish that test.
Because you did it in your room, and I had the rest of the students in
Yeah.
here. Like a lot of the students who needed that extra small group help were in here, and one by one they all came back except our guy. And I sent her
it rolled into my planning period. I had planning after her block, and my entire planning period. And he was like, there was no breaks. He was typing the entire.
Did you say he was grinning?
And he was grinning. It was the biggest smile. And he was just having a ball. Like
And
3
not
hours.
only that, but his answers were brilliant. They were way better than any, like, the cognitive level for them was way better than anything I had gotten from
It might not have been academically rich language. It was extremely well thought through, though.
It was amazing. And he did such a great job. For example, he said that if Shylock were a car, he'd be a Jetta, because the Jetta is a foreign car, and whenever you have car trouble, it's even harder because it's not, you know, the car isn't made locally, and that ties into Shylock because he was Jewish and he wasn't considered a citizen, so that when he got into trouble, it was extra big trouble, and not just, you know, like. And I'm reading this like.
It was,
oh wow, it was so great. And we tried it again with another student who was a super big car guy. I tried it again just to see if it could be duplicated. But I could do it with anybody. This was a general test question. I said, you know, pick something that you like, pick these 4 characters and put them in that category. So you could do candy if you wanted. You could, you know, and one student, I told him, I said, I know that you're a car dude. This is your chance. And I just said, you know, if you wanted to do it with cars, you could. And again, maybe not quite the rich, maybe 1 or 2 clicks below where our guy was, but way better than he would have done on any other question, because we played to his strengths and he was able to show us that he knew this inside and out.
Yeah.
And that was that I want you to have the freedom to make the connections, but also we can put it in a way that lets you play to your strengths. We remove some of those barriers to mastery.
Right.
And both of them were really able to shine in a way that I don't think they would have if they had gone by that.
Because we allowed them to use their strengths.
Yeah.
To show us what they understood of a content that might not have been their choice. They might not have enjoyed it,
but they got it.
They got it, and
Yeah.
they knew it, and they could share it with us when we opened the door and said, let's take a step back and do it in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think that is really impactful for a lot of students. And it's not just our multilingual learners that need that. Sometimes it's any learner. They just need you to step back and say, shine, do your thing, show me what you know. And having the confidence to do that, or allow them to do that.
Yeah.
I think it does take some confidence in yourself as a teacher to do it, though.
And to relinquish what you think of as right and wrong, and what we've been taught are that academic culture as right and wrong, and being able to take a step back and to do that. It's taken a lot. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
But it's been a great journey. I said, and it's been freeing now, because instead of just having the canon to pull from. I can pull from so many different places now. And that's how I even found the playwright Luis Alfaro, who had rewritten these three Greek tragedies. And I used them for my seniors as well, because a lot of the principles that we use for multilingual learners and that we use for gifted learners, honestly, they're just best practices.
Right.
A lot of them do just translate to best practices. You know, they're good for all of our kids. And so being able to do that was really freeing. And my seniors loved it. They did a Latino version of Medea, and we finished the play 2 days early because they screamed to keep going. I was like, okay, we're gonna pause it. They're like, no. And my little English teacher heart was so happy. I was like, okay, we'll keep going. I'm gonna bottle this feeling up for a rainy day. And so, but yeah, and it was great. But they all loved it. All the kids. It wasn't just the multilingual kids who ate it up. You know, my little country boy pig farmer loved it. He was leading the pack because he wanted to know what happened to Medea. And that was just it was a great experience. But again, it's a lot of these are just best practices for any of your students, really and truly. And that's the big thing to learn.
And our going back to our education and our educational journeys, I think for both of us, it's been important that we continue our studies and continue to try and not be stagnated, because in our continuing and striving in our education, I think that that's what's really prompting us to step back and look at it and say, oh, let me try this. Let me try and open this door. Let me tweak this a little bit. And that constant little bit of change in the studies that we're doing and going, oh, that's a great idea. Let's try it. And I think that goes with our collaboration too. It's just that constant, oh, let's try that. And what if we, and all of the what ifs and the let's try that. And maybe if I did this, I think that is huge for both of us in our educational practice. It is.
I guess we want the kids to take risk academically. We've got to do it too. We've got to take that risk. And we've all had that feeling where we tried something in the class and we sit back and we go, well, that didn't work.
Oh, and you'll still have those days. Yeah. We all still have those days. We just go, wonder how I can change that for it to work next time. Or do I just completely toss it out? And that might be okay too. Maybe we just don't try and do a sonnet with 12 newcomers.
Yeah. No.
I'm not looking forward to that. That's my Monday, is we're doing sonnets.
I'll help you out.
Yeah, we might need it.
But we did like that. I had something, I just knew it was going to be a humdinger. It was from Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, and it was Thor, and it was Loki, and I could tie it in with a Marvel connection because I know all these guys just love Marvel, and it was a disaster. It was, and I went to Abby, like after those 2 classes, I have third period plan. I went, what happened? Because that did not go as planned. That was bad.
I think my answer was,
it was one too many cultural filters, that it just was a little bit, there were one too many. Yeah. And when you said it, I was like, well, yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah. Because it was, Thor disguises himself as a bride to go get his hammer back because it was stolen, and there were ogres and cross-dressing and Thor, and it was just one
conceptual framework too many.
And we've learned, and that's the thing now, and I've got a little note on my little monthly agenda, and I every time I go back and open up my semester plans, I see that note it's like, note to self, use a different text next year. Because it just fell flat, and that's not.
It's not to say the work isn't worth teaching.
No.
And it is a great activity. It just didn't work with that group of students. And maybe next time it will, but maybe it won't. And so how do we adjust?
We do.
And I was going to say, maybe you get another group of kids at some point that will get it.
Yeah. And if you've got some super if you
have a Juan,
he would love it.
We have one student that is very obsessed with all things superhero. And he is actually been accepted to UNG. And he's going to study film.
Which makes perfect sense.
And that is that is exactly what this kid is going to do with his life. He has a plan, and he is going to produce movies, and we are all going to pay a lot of money to go watch those movies someday. But he is super into superheroes. And so he would have gotten every reference you made there. He would have understood every component of it, and he would have led the class discussion, and he probably would have dragged the rest kicking and screaming along, because he won't allow them to not be involved in it. But if you don't have that kid in the class, it might be one step too many.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, we do crisscross. I know we like to say we're not in entertainment, but we do crisscross a lot with stand-up comedians in that we do have like that ability to read a room is so important to sit there and say, is this going to work? Is this not? Because now that I've gotten to know my kids more, there's been a lot of stuff this semester I've changed, or I've said, you know what? We're going to redirect this way. I'm going to read the room a little bit better that way, you know, and being able to make those judgment calls on behalf of your kids.
I think you called it spidey senses once, and that cracked me up. Yeah, my spidey senses are saying that y'all aren't getting this, so let's try it differently.
As you can feel that moment where you lose the class, and so I think it's just like teacher senses tingling. I just lost every single one of y'all. Hang on.
Regroup. And of course, when we call ourselves out on it, it engages the kids because they're all like, "Oh, you're just admitting a fault." Yeah, I will.
It happens.
It happens.
It happens.
But you recenter the attention and you just go forward, try again. And
I think you said a key thing there, that you get to know your students. And I think that I commend you for, you know, trying different things that connect with them, because building background knowledge is a big part of that, getting to know your students to be able to make those connections. So I commend you guys on just trying new things. And I think you said it right there, just really getting to know who your students are. But I've very much enjoyed hearing everything that you guys have to say. Some really good nuggets there. I'm just wondering, as we get closer to the final minutes, if anyone else, I haven't seen anything else in the chat. Anybody want to add anything or have any thoughts or questions for our guest speakers?
I promise we don't bite.
Yeah.
But I also love the connection that you made between getting the gifted certification and then working and then the multilingual learner, because you know, I myself grew up bilingual, and I started out as a bilingual education teacher in California, and I pursued my gifted certification to advocate for my multilingual learners who I could see they belonged in the gifted program and they were being overlooked. So I think, I mean, the more that we can diversify ourselves to meet the needs of our diverse students, right? So I think that's really great.
I love the way you
appreciate you guys tonight.
Yeah.
No, I think that's wonderful. Yeah. And it does help. I know, and being able to see them, because they're not, a lot of these kids are just brilliant and they don't even know it too. You know, all they see is what they can't do. And it's so easy to let that override what all the stuff they can do. And, you know, we were talking on the way here, like, I love analyzing literature. I can analyze literature to a pretty high level, but if I had to do it in my tourism Spanish, it will not translate. It won't, I can't convey it. And so that's that frustration there. But yeah, we've got some absolutely brilliant kids, and just removing whatever barriers we can so that they can be their best, the best version of themselves, and they can show us what all they can do. It's a great experience to be able to see them like flourish like that too. I love it.
Absolutely. The story about your Cars kid. That's awesome. That's fantastic.
Great day. We were giddy.
I think the giddiness lasted for about a month after that.
Oh,
I think it was all the way through the end of the school year, just ecstatic joy.
You couldn't tell us anything.
You're the best. That's how it felt for a minute there.
Excuse
and then
me.
it's like, how do I improve on this?
Oh, we can't duplicate this one. Now what?
Yeah, well, next time, instead of the Marvel heroes, maybe try Lucha Libre.
Yeah.
I know that was really big with my kids back in Coachella, or well, the Coachella Valley. But anyways, I'm going to just share screen really quick because I do want to take us to that final slide. Hopefully I can get this up. And I just want to thank you both again for taking time to share with us. It was a really great experience. I love your collaboration and your conversation around your guiding questions there. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful hour of entertainment with you guys. But so for our participants, thank you so much for coming and joining us this evening. I know it's a lot that we do. We're always busy. And so we just appreciate everyone's time. And thank you for coming. And we want to just announce our next session in the Dr. Elizabeth Webb Professional Learning Series will be Disciplinary Language and Literacy, Communities of Practice. And so we look forward to seeing you on May 2nd for this great opportunity to hear from our panel. The Georgia TESOL Conference is in planning, and so we're going to be looking for some great proposals. We need some people to present at our conference, and we would love to see any of you. And so this is an opportunity to just kind of hear about how you can go about writing a proposal and submitting to the Georgia TESOL for our conference. And our theme this year is going to be impact. And with that said, there's a QR code there, but I did put in the chat the link. Let me send that out really quickly in the chat. And I don't know why it's in the middle of my screen, but there's the link to the feedback form. Please complete the feedback form for us. We appreciate that. And ladies, thank you again. And we will definitely follow up. We will share the feedback with you. And I believe the recording will be turned into like a YouTube video thing, and then you'll receive the link for that. So I did find that out. So you will get that link. And thanks again. And everybody have a great evening and a fabulous Friday. We're almost to the weekend. Anything
Thank you,
else?
guys.
Thank you.
Great job, Abby and Kira. It was awesome.
Yeah, you guys were great. And it's exactly 6:30. I'm going to stop the recording. Oop.